In Washington, Republicans are all set to take control of the House, but their leader, Kevin McCarthy, is being forced to make some big concessions to right-wing members of the party in his bid to become House Speaker. It could be a sign of things to come as Republicans prepare to turn up the heat on President Biden. Scott McFarlane is on Capitol Hill for us. Scott, Happy New Year. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Ed. Republicans have pledged aggressive oversight and investigations of the Biden administration, but first they have to end this standoff inside their own party over who will be the next U.S. House Speaker. Kevin McCarthy of California will spend the next 24 hours trying to secure the necessary votes to become Speaker. But even after a late Sunday phone call with colleagues and concessions to conservatives, it doesn't appear McCarthy has the votes yet, potentially setting the stage tomorrow for drama on the House floor. Republicans have such a narrow majority, the margins will be particularly slim for this vote. One of the votes he might need is from New York's George Santos, the embattled congressman-elect who's accused of lying about key parts of his life, including his education, his work history, claiming his grandparents survived the Holocaust. He's also facing questions about how he came into the money to help fund his campaign. There have been calls from some of his soon-to-be colleagues for Santos to step aside or undergo an ethics investigation, but Santos has pledged to serve his full 2-year term. So far, House leadership hasn't commented on Santos, but Ed, you better believe they'll face more questions when they return here today.
Yeah, and they're going to need his vote. To be clear, critical 24 hours ahead for Kevin McCarthy in his bid to become House Speaker. Does not yet have the vote. Scott McFarlane will be tracking it all for us on Capitol Hill. Thank you.
This was the Ukrainians using what they said were the U.S.-provided HIMARS system, which is a multiple rocket launching system that the U.S. has given to Ukraine. The Ukrainians have been using with devastating effect against the Russians. It struck what was kind of a vocational school that the Russians had turned into a barracks. So there were presumably tons, hundreds maybe, of Russian troops, newly enlisted troops, who were just sleeping there. And then they were struck by these missiles. We've heard from Russian pro-military bloggers now a fresh round of recriminations, condemnations of the Russian Ministry of Defense. These are bloggers who tend to have connections with the military and with Russian intelligence. They were normally cheerleading the war at its outset, and ever since now they've been harshly critical. This set off, again, another round of anger from these bloggers who, again, have some connection with the Russian military, criticizing the Russian military for what it sounds like storing munitions in the same place where all of these recruits were sleeping. So this was considered to be a massive mistake. And, you know, the Russians owned up to this. They said as many as 63 men were killed. The Ukrainians said it could be as many as 400 deaths, even though the Ukrainians didn't necessarily, claim having done this attack.
It's been 8 months since the unprecedented leak of the Supreme Court draft opinion on Roe v. Wade. And as Chief Justice Roberts reveals in his end-of-year report, there is still no breakthrough on who was behind it. Judicial Crisis Network President and former Supreme Court Clerk Carrie Severino joins us now. Good morning, Carrie. Thanks so much for being with us. Carrie, every judge swears an oath to perform, regardless of fear or fervor. That's under the pretense that they will have some protection. Does this leak undermine the integrity of our entire judicial system?
Absolutely, and it's interesting. While I think that the Chief Justice didn't mention the elephant in the room, which is the fact we still don't know who this leaker is, it did focus a lot on court security, and that's something that I think was the goal of the leaker, to put those justices in fear and to try to influence and intimidate them into ruling the way that the justice wants. He tells the story of the Little Rock Nine who helped desegregate the schools, and the judge that was involved in that case who faced threats himself, and how we need to have safety for our judges to ensure we have the rule of law, not the rule of the mob. So it's very sad to see that leak has led to this kind of intimidation for our justices and need for increased judicial security now.
Well, Justice Gorsuch recently said in September that we can expect to see some of the results of the investigation soon, but we haven't seen anything yet. What do you expect the outcome to be?
Yeah, I think that was really surprising. It shows that even the justices themselves aren't being kept in the loop on this and don't seem to know what's going on. He seemed to think, and I think it was Justice Kagan who also suggested around the same time, oh, we're going to get a report on this soon, I guess when this committee is done. Well, we've heard nothing. That was the first the American people had heard that there even was a committee investigating this. So I think that's very discouraging. And, you know, the moment to find this leaker was immediately afterward. I don't think enough must have been done right then, because there's a small universe of people who had access to draft opinions like that, and many of them have left the court by this point. So it's going to be hard for the Chief Justice to track them down now.
Well, I think they said 70 people, so hopefully they could narrow it down. Thank you so much, Carrie Severino.
ABC News contributor and former FBI agent Brad Garrett joins me now for more on this. Brad, so far this suspect appears to have no direct connection to the victim. So how do investigators go about trying to uncover the motive here?
Well, that's a good question, unless he's provided them with one. I'll tell you, Diane, this case has a different direction to it than probably any other homicide you and I have talked about. I mean, homicides tend to be driven by rage, revenge, greed, jealousy, etc. This is a crime that seems to me that the person really, it's something they really wanted to do. In other words, like, if you can believe this, satisfaction from committing murder. That does fit the profile of serial killers. I'm not suggesting this person charged as a serial killer. I'm only saying that the identity factor of where you identify with the crime, you live the crime, you experience it. I suspect if he was in this conversation with us, he could give you every detail as to what happened inside that house, how he got in the house, how he got out, who he attacked first, how he attacked them, did any of them attack him, if that's the case. So you're talking about an entirely different type of individual.
Police say they identified him through DNA technology and tracked him down through the car. But this arrest still took weeks. Could the fact that the suspect was studying criminology and criminal justice, it has a certain level of expertise there, could that present challenges in this case?
I doubt it. Well, first of all, he apparently left his DNA at the scene, which I would have predicted his DNA would have been at the scene, only because in working dozens of stabbing homicides, it's very difficult to stab, in this case, 4 people multiple times and not cut yourself. And so I think they found his DNA at the scene. He has no record, so his DNA is not on file, but through genetic genealogy, they were able to track down through family records his DNA. So you have a DNA hit and you have the car that was placed at the scene, and I think between the two is probably the basis of the probable cause.
All right, Brad Garrett, this is a case we will be talking a lot about going forward. I'm sure we appreciate your analysis as always. Thank you.
One day before the new Congress is seated, Kevin McCarthy still appears to be well short of the votes needed to become the next House Speaker. In a new letter obtained by NBC News, 9 House Republicans write, the current minority leader has not done enough to win their support, even after he made a key concession to them last week. The letter reads in part, quote, despite some progress achieved, Mr. McCarthy's statement comes almost impossibly late to address the continued deficiencies ahead of the opening of the 118th Congress. Thus far, there continue to be missing specific commitments with respect to virtually every component of our entreaties, and thus no means to measure whether promises are kept or broken. In a note to his Republican colleagues last week, McCarthy agreed to lower the threshold for forcing a vote to oust the Speaker. Making matters more difficult to him, the group of 9 lawmakers who penned the new letter does not include 5 other House Republicans who have firmly voiced their opposition to McCarthy's speakership bid. In total, McCarthy can only afford to lose just 4 Republican votes and still be elected Speaker.
At least he's got Santos on his side.
Oh,
How
my
would you like
God.
to be in a position where you got to count on that guy telling you the truth about the support?
We have a report coming up on George Santos.
Yeah.
Daniela Pierre-Bravo went to his district to talk to his voters. That's an incredible story.
It really is.
That guy lied about his entire life.
Everything.
Even his mother and when she passed away.
But he's all in, though. He's all in for Kevin McCarthy. So Jonathan Lemire, if there's a backup plan for these Republicans that are holding out on McCarthy, I don't know what it is. I find it hard to believe that they're going to go to the floor and he's not going to get the 218 votes, because then there's just chaos that ensues. What are some of the other options you've heard? Is it Scalise? Is it Elise Stefanik? Who is it?
It's been 100 years, Joe, 100 years since the House last failed to elect the Speaker on the first ballot. 100 years. And that's what we'd be looking at here if that vote was held at this moment. So there is a suggestion here. McCarthy is scrambling. Reports are that he has been trying to. We saw last night he was willing to give away some speakership power, making it easier to oust a potential speaker as some sort of deal in order to get the necessary votes. But he seems to be losing votes as the new Congress is about to dawn, as opposed to gaining them. So he's in still some trouble. In terms of alternatives, there hasn't been a lot of chatter yet beyond the Scalise name. Steve Scalise has said that he's publicly not saying he's interested, but one would suspect that if it was put to him, he would probably take it. But there are lack of alternatives here. And right now, it goes to show you just how desperate McCarthy is, that he is still banking on the likes of George Santos, if, frankly, we can even believe that is actually George Santos' name, because every other part of his biography is seemingly made up. But we've got a lot here in these next 24 to 36 hours. There's going to be a lot of drama in this incoming Republican Congress to see if McCarthy can get over the finish line.